A woman called me at 2 a.m. about my husband, but what I found was worse than cheating. I thought it was an affair, hotel receipts, secret Wednesdays, my sister's name. But the truth ran deeper: blackmail, control, and a man who built his life on quiet manipulation. My husband Caleb always kept his phone on silent. Always. At first, I thought it was sweet. Considerate, even. He said it was because of work, didn't want to disturb clients or meetings. He was a financial advisor, always juggling time zones and anxious investors. It made sense. I trusted him. We'd been married for 6 years. No kids, not by choice. I'd had a miscarriage in our second year, and after that, it was like the subject vanished. Caleb never pushed. That he loved me, no matter what. And I believed him. Our life was quiet, comfortable. Maybe too quiet. I worked from home as a freelance designer. Caleb came home late most nights, smelling like peppermint gum and expensive cologne. He always had a reason: client dinners, late calls, traffic. I never questioned it. Not really. But there was always that damn phone. He never left it lying around. It was always face down, even during dinner. If I asked who texted, he'd glance at it and say something like, "Just work stuff." If I ever picked it up, even just to move it, he'd reach for it immediately, casually, but quickly. Still, I didn't snoop. I was raised to believe that if you have to dig, something's already broken. So I kept the peace. Smiled. Kissed him goodnight. Pretended the silence didn't bother me. Until the night it rang. It was a Wednesday. 2:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because the sound jolted me awake. A shrill, vibrating ring on the nightstand. I turned over, groggy, confused. Caleb was snoring beside me. I reached for the phone without thinking. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, hushed and trembling, said, "You need to know the truth about Caleb." Then she hung up. I sat there in the dark, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. I shook Caleb awake. He groaned, rolled over. "What? What is it?" "Someone just called you," I whispered. "A woman. She said I need to know the truth about you." He blinked at me, bleary-eyed. "What the hell are you talking about?" I showed him the call log. The number was already gone. Deleted? Glitched? I don't know. Probably a scam, he mumbled. "People say weird crap to get your info. Go back to sleep." Then he turned over and started snoring again. But I couldn't sleep. Something had shifted. A tiny tear in the fabric of my trust. And once you see the thread unraveling, you can't unsee it. You either pull it, or you pretend it's not there. I decided to pull. The next morning, Caleb acted like nothing happened. He kissed me on the forehead, poured his coffee, and left for work with his usual half-smile. No mention of the call. No follow-up. Just silence. But my mind wasn't quiet. I replayed the woman's voice over and over. You need to know the truth about Caleb. Who was she? Was she warning me? Threatening me? What truth? I told myself not to spiral. But I did anyway. That day, while cleaning the kitchen, I noticed Caleb had left his jacket hanging over the chair. His phone wasn't in the pocket, it was still with him, but his wallet was. I never went through his things before. I told myself I was just curious. Inside was the usual: credit cards, his license, some crumpled receipts. One receipt stood out. It was from a hotel downtown. A single night stay, just 2 weeks ago. Room 814. Paid in cash. We lived 20 minutes from that hotel. When I confronted him about it that night, I tried to stay casual. "Hey, weird question. Did you stay at the Hilton last month?" He looked up from his pasta, chewing slowly. "No." "Why?" "Oh, just. I saw a receipt in your wallet. Thought maybe it was a client, or something." He wiped his mouth. "That? Yeah. I booked a room for a client coming in from out of town. Company card was acting up, so I paid cash. Forgot to give the receipt to accounting." He said it smoothly. Easily. Like it wasn't the first time he'd covered his tracks. I nodded. Makes sense. But it didn't. That night, after he fell asleep, I started checking more. I looked through our shared credit card statements. Most charges looked normal: Groceries, gas, dinners out. But every Wednesday, there was always a gap. Nothing between 5 p.m. and midnight. As if he vanished once a week. Then I remembered something else. My sister Kelsey had recently stopped coming over for our monthly dinners. She always had a reason: work ran late, got a headache, rescheduling. She and Caleb used to get along really well. Too well, sometimes. I brushed it off as sibling-in-law charm. But lately, she seemed distant. Cold, even. I decided to test something. The next Wednesday, I told Caleb I was meeting an old friend for dinner. He nodded, barely looking up from his laptop. Cool. Have fun. At 6:30 p.m., I parked down the street from Kelsey's apartment. And I waited. At 7:12, Caleb's car pulled up. I nearly threw up. He didn't knock. He had a key. He walked right in. I didn't go to the door. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. I sat in my car and cried silently into the steering wheel. Not just from betrayal, but from the terrifying realization that I'd seen this coming. I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't confront him that night. Or the next. I needed to be sure. I needed to know everything before I made a move. Because now, this wasn't just about cheating. It was about who he was. And who my sister had become. The next morning, Caleb came home from his late meeting, freshly showered, humming under his breath. He kissed my cheek and made a comment about grabbing dinner together that weekend, like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, my heart felt like a brick lodged in my chest. I texted Kelsey later that day. Hey. Haven't seen you in a while. You okay? She replied 6 hours later. Yeah, just been slammed with work. Let's catch up soon. Cold. Distant. Almost like she knew something I didn't want her to. I started tracking patterns. Every Wednesday, Caleb came home a little too cheerful. Every Thursday morning, I found myself staring at him across the breakfast table, wondering how long I'd been married to a stranger. I stopped sleeping. I kept running through memories like old surveillance footage. A year ago, Kelsey stayed with us for 2 weeks when her water heater broke. Caleb insisted she take our guest room. They'd cook together, laugh together. Once, I walked in and they were whispering in the kitchen. They stopped when they saw me. I thought I was paranoid back then. Now I wasn't so sure. I went through Caleb's drawers when he was out. Nothing suspicious. No secret phones, no letters. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't scared of finding the truth anymore. I was desperate for it. One night, I downloaded a phone tracking app on Caleb's old iPad. The iPad was barely used, linked to his iCloud. He never even remembered it existed. But once I set it up, I could see his movements. Every ping. Every destination. The following Wednesday, I watched a little blue dot drive toward the east side of town. It stopped near a cafe. Then an hour later, it moved again, to the same hotel as the receipt. Room 814. I screenshot everything. Dates. Times. Locations. Then I checked the footage on our home's security camera. He always waved goodbye at the door. But I noticed something: on Wednesdays, he never took his laptop. Just his phone. Like he wasn't planning to do any work at all. I thought about confronting him. Instead, I planned something else. The next week, I pretended to go visit my cousin out of town. I told Caleb I needed a few days to clear my head. He didn't ask questions. Didn't even seem curious. Just said, "Take all the time you need." That Wednesday, I parked behind the same hotel. I watched as Caleb's car pulled in. A few minutes later, someone else arrived. Kelsey. She was wearing a hoodie, sunglasses, and kept looking over her shoulder like someone in a movie. She followed him in. I didn't cry this time. I just sat there. Frozen. Like my body had shut off its emotional circuit board. I waited an hour. Then another. They didn't come out. That night I didn't go home. I stayed with a friend, pretending everything was fine. I smiled, laughed even. But inside, I was unraveling. Because it wasn't just the cheating. It was the conspiracy. The shared lies. The years I spent defending them both, trusting them both. I knew I couldn't confront them yet. Not without more. I needed to know why. I started visiting my mother more after that. Not because I wanted comfort. But because I needed to be around someone who hadn't betrayed me. She noticed something was off almost immediately. "You're not eating," she said one afternoon over coffee. And you keep picking at your sleeves. I looked down. My thumbnail had torn a thread in my sweater. I'm fine, I lied. Just work stress. But I wasn't fine. I was unraveling, slowly, methodically. The more I watched Caleb and Kelsey, the more patterns emerged. They weren't always meeting at the hotel. Sometimes it was a park. Once, a small Airbnb in the hills. Every Wednesday. Always Wednesdays. I checked the tracking history like it was my religion. Then I remembered something. 4 months ago, on a random Thursday, I came home early from a meeting. Kelsey had been sitting on our back patio with Caleb, laughing. They said she just stopped by, spur of the moment. I remember feeling weird about it. She didn't text me or anything. Just showed up at my house to hang out with my husband? Now I saw it clearly. She wasn't just cheating with him. She was building a second life, one I wasn't part of. The worst part? They were good at it. Too good. Not just a slip-up or a drunken mistake. This was choreographed. Practiced. Which meant it wasn't new. I started replaying old conversations. Holidays. Birthdays. The way Caleb always complimented Kelsey's cooking. How she laughed a little too hard at his jokes. The time I was sick and Caleb offered to drive Kelsey home after dinner, a solid 40-minute detour. And I remembered something else. 2 years ago, Kelsey broke off an engagement with a guy named Jordan. She never told me why. Said it wasn't working. That was the end of it. But what if there was more? What if Caleb had something to do with that? The possibility made my stomach churn. I tried calling Kelsey that night. No answer. I left a voicemail. Please call me back. I need to talk to you. Just us. She didn't call. But 2 days later, she showed up at my door, unannounced. She looked terrible. Pale. Eyes rimmed red. She wouldn't look me in the eye. Can we talk inside? She asked quietly. I nodded. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one she used to help me decorate for holidays. The same one where she laughed with Caleb while I poured wine. I know, I said. She froze. Know what? Don't do that. Her lip trembled. I never meant. Stop. She started crying. I didn't comfort her. Then she said something I didn't expect. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He manipulated everything. He made it feel like I owed him. I narrowed my eyes. Owed him? She nodded, wiping her face. I made a mistake. A big one. Years ago. He found out. And he said if I didn't help him, if I didn't play along, he'd ruin me. My stomach twisted. Play along how? She looked at me with pure shame. At first, it was just texting. Then meeting up. Then, everything. I hated it. But he made it seem like I didn't have a choice. I leaned back in my chair, my skin crawling. So you've been sleeping with my husband, because he blackmailed you? She nodded slowly. But I'm not innocent. I started liking it. The attention. The danger. I got pulled in. I lost myself. I stared at her. This wasn't just betrayal. It was insanity. I need you to tell me everything, I said coldly. Because this ends now. She nodded again. And she started talking. The story Kelsey told me that night shattered what little I had left of my family. It started with a mistake. Years ago, when Kelsey was 22 and working at a real estate firm, she got caught up in a wire fraud scheme. Small time, she didn't even know it was happening until it was too late. But her name was on some paperwork. Enough to get her fired quietly and almost sued. She never told anyone. Not even me. But Caleb found out. Not by accident, he dug into her. Background checks. Old contacts. All under the guise of looking out for me. That's what he told her when he confronted her about it. He said he'd keep it to himself. Kelsey whispered. But then he started asking for things. Coffee. Dinner. Texting him when you weren't around. Little stuff. I stared at her, frozen. And you agreed? She looked down at her hands. At first, I thought if I just played along, he'd get bored. But he didn't. He kept escalating. And when I tried to pull away, he'd remind me what he had. He said if I told you, he'd make sure you thought I was coming on to him. That he'd turn you against me. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it. I didn't believe he could do that. She said. Until I started seeing how easily he lied. How much you trusted him. I stood up and backed away from the table. My knees felt weak. You still could have told me, I said. You could have warned me. I know, she said. I tried. That night I called from the block number. That was me. I panicked. I thought maybe if I just told you anonymously, you'd figure it out. But then he showed up the next day like nothing happened, and I saw how easily he covered it up. I thought you'd hate me. I do, I said softly. But not for the reason you think. She flinched. I left her at the table and went upstairs. Locked the bedroom door behind me. And cried until I couldn't breathe. The next morning, Caleb acted like everything was normal. He asked if I wanted to go see a movie that weekend. Talked about a new client who needed estate planning. I nodded. Smiled. Played the part. But inside I was ice. I had everything I needed now, the betrayal, the manipulation, the pattern of behavior. Kelsey wasn't his only victim. That much I knew. She was just the one closest to home. And I'd been the perfect cover. The loyal wife. The trusting sister. The idiot. Not anymore. That week, I spoke to a lawyer. Quietly. I made copies of Caleb's location history, his financials, even the hotel receipts I found in his wallet and email. I asked about hidden assets. I asked about privacy protections. I asked how to take someone apart without them seeing it coming. Then I did something bold. I invited Kelsey and Caleb to dinner. At a restaurant. Neutral ground. Public place. I told them I wanted to clear the air. Kelsey hesitated. Caleb said yes immediately. He showed up in a crisp button-down and that smug grin he wore when he thought he was 10 steps ahead. Kelsey came late, looking like she wanted to crawl out of her own skin. We ordered drinks. I made small talk. Then I slid a white envelope across the table. What's this? Caleb asked, laughing. Open it. He did. Inside was a USB drive. And a single printed sentence. I know everything. Kelsey's face went pale. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked up at me, searching for weakness. There was none. I suggest you both leave quietly, I said. Because if you don't, what's on that drive goes to your boss, your clients, your parents, and the police. Caleb didn't blink. He just stared. Calculating. But Kelsey started crying. Right there in the restaurant. I stood up and tossed the 50 on the table. Dinner's on me. And I walked out. They thought I was bluffing. 2 days after that dinner, Caleb showed up at my work. He was waiting by my car, calm as ever, arms crossed. You really want to ruin your life over a misunderstanding? He said, like he was the victim. You think people won't question why you stayed with me if I was doing all this? I didn't answer. I just got in my car and locked the door. He tapped the window once. You're not thinking straight, babe. We can fix this. Then he walked off like we'd had a normal conversation. That night, I sent the first wave of emails. Not everything, just a teaser. Screenshots of location history. A receipt or two. A cropped image of the hotel's security footage I'd pulled through a quiet favor. I didn't need to burn it all yet. I just needed to remind him I wasn't bluffing. Kelsey called me in a panic the next morning. He's freaking out. She whispered. He thinks you've got a lawyer. I do. Silence. She lowered her voice. He said if you don't stop, he's going to flip it on you. Say you were unstable. That you're harassing him. I expected it. Narcissists always play the victim when the mirror breaks. What Caleb didn't expect was that I'd already talked to his firm. Not just casually, but with evidence. I met privately with one of his clients who'd also been manipulated. She was older, lonely, and had once complained to HR that Caleb made her uncomfortable. They dismissed it, of course. But when she saw what I had, she cried. He'd been grooming her for months. Promising financial growth while flirting with her. She'd given him access to everything. When I told her I was going public, she said, "Make sure he never does this again." So I did. The next few weeks were a slow-motion collapse. Kelsey moved out of state, or so she said. She left me a long, rambling letter that I didn't read. I didn't need her justifications. She was a grown woman who made choices. I stopped being her safety net the moment she made me her alibi. Caleb? He lost his job quietly. No police. No drama. Just a firm handshake and a mutual NDA, and he was gone. He tried to play it cool, like he was switching firms. But his name started circulating. Whispers of misconduct. Unofficial blacklists. Then came the day I served him divorce papers. He stared at them across the table like they were a bomb. "You know you'll regret this, right?" he said. "No," I replied. "I regret trusting you." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I should have picked someone else," he muttered under his breath. And just like that, the mask slipped. Because Caleb had never loved me. I was a prop. The respectable wife. The steady cover for his rot. I walked out of that room and never looked back. But before I disappeared completely from his life, I made one last move. I sent every bit of evidence I had to an anonymous whistleblower email. Financial misconduct, blackmail, predatory behavior. I sent it to the firm's board. Their biggest client. The state's ethics committee. Not out of revenge. Out of duty. Because silence protects monsters. And I wasn't silent anymore. It's been 9 months since I burned it all down. People ask if I feel free now. If leaving Caleb and cutting off Kelsey made everything better. The truth? It didn't feel like freedom at first. It felt like grief. Heavy and raw and humiliating. Like I'd ripped off my own skin and didn't recognize what was underneath. But slowly, the silence started to feel different. Not like hiding. Like healing. I moved to a smaller place, closer to the coast. Changed my number. Kept my circle tight. No social media. No digital trail. I told my mom the basics, that Caleb and I had split. I didn't mention Kelsey. Some things are just too poisonous to speak aloud. Caleb tried reaching out a few times. Emails. A letter. A voicemail on my birthday. I didn't answer any of it. Let him scream into the void. Kelsey, to her credit, stayed gone. I started therapy. My first session, I sat down and said, "I don't know who I am without other people's lies." My therapist smiled and said, "Good. That means you're ready to find out." Some days I still look over my shoulder. Trauma doesn't evaporate. But I don't jump at every sound. I don't dread Wednesdays. I don't scan hotel parking lots, or read into every compliment, or question if love is just manipulation in a nicer suit. I've learned that sometimes, betrayal isn't just about sex or secrets. It's about the story you've told yourself, the myth you built your life around, crumbling. And you're left sitting in the rubble, trying to figure out which parts were ever real. But here's the thing. Once the dust settles, you get to choose what you build next. I've chosen peace. Boundaries. Truth. Even when it's ugly. There's no dramatic ending to this story. No arrests. No viral takedowns. Just a woman who finally saw what was always there. And decided she deserved better. I don't need revenge. I need peace of mind. And I've finally got it. Even if his phone rings every night from now on, it'll never be my problem again.